Have you ever been judged by how you look? Have you ever felt the sting of disrespect, not because of who you are, but because of what others think you are? Today's story will shake your heart, a story that reminds us that appearances can deceive, and humility can be the richest thing a person owns. Welcome to Swift Tale, where every story carries a message worth remembering. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because the story you're about to hear might just change the way you see people forever. Our story begins in a city filled with luxury, where tall glass hotels touch the sky and only the elite can afford to stay. Inside one of those hotels, famous for its golden halls and wealthy guests, something unforgettable happened. One evening, a man walked in wearing old, dusty clothes. His hair was messy, his shoes worn out. He looked tired, hungry, and out of place. But behind those tired eyes was a calmness that no one could understand. The hotel staff noticed him immediately. Their smiles vanished, replaced by disgust and arrogance. The receptionist whispered to her colleague, "Why is he here? He doesn't belong in a place like this." Guests turned to stare. Some giggled, others looked away as if ashamed to even see him. And that's when the insults began, small at first, hidden behind fake smiles, but soon loud enough for everyone to hear. The man simply asked for a glass of water, that's it. But the staff's reaction was cruel. "Sir," said the manager mockingly, "this is a five-star hotel, not a public shelter." Laughter filled the lobby. The man didn't argue. He lowered his eyes, smiled faintly, and walked out silently. But what no one knew, not the manager, not the guests, not even the security guard who had laughed, was that this man held the keys to the very building they stood in. That night, the hotel staff celebrated their arrogance, proud of how they'd protected their reputation. But the next morning, everything changed. Cars with tinted windows pulled up, security rushed to the entrance, and everyone straightened their uniforms. The owner of the hotel was arriving, the mysterious figure no one had ever met in person. The staff lined up nervously, ready to impress. And then, the doors opened. To their horror, the poor man from last night stepped out, not in dusty clothes, but in a designer suit, with a calm smile that said everything words couldn't. The man they mocked, insulted, and humiliated was the very owner of the hotel. This story isn't just about money, it's about respect. It's about how we treat people when we think no one is watching. Because sometimes, life has a strange way of revealing the truth, and those who look down on others often find themselves falling the hardest. So stay till the end, because what happened after this shocking reveal will leave you speechless. And before we dive deeper, ask yourself, how often do we judge people before truly knowing them? You're watching Swift Tale, and this is the story of the man who was insulted for being poor, but returned as the king of the place that mocked him. The story unfolds inside one of the most luxurious hotels in the entire city, the Grand Pearl. Towering above the streets like a symbol of prestige and power, the hotel glimmered in the golden sunlight. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, scattering reflections that danced across the marble floors. The scent of imported perfume lingered in the air, mixing with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee served in crystal cups. Every corner whispered wealth, velvet sofas, polished staircases, and paintings worth more than an average worker's lifetime savings. Outside, the sound of cars honking faded beneath the quiet hum of class and privilege. Guests in designer suits and elegant dresses moved gracefully through the lobby, greeted by bowing bellboys and smiling receptionists. Every gesture here had been trained, from the polite tilt of the head to the rehearsed, "Welcome to the Grand Pearl, how may I assist you today?" It was a world of appearances, where status mattered more than sincerity. Behind the polished counters stood Mr. Rajan, the hotel manager, a man who wore arrogance like a second skin. His hair was always perfectly combed, his suit flawless, and his smile sharp enough to cut glass. He believed his position made him superior, and he treated anyone who did look rich as invisible. Around him worked a team of employees who admired his authority but feared his temper. To them, service wasn't about kindness, it was about showing off their importance. That evening, as the sunset painted the sky orange, the hotel prepared for a special night. A famous business conference was scheduled for the next morning, and guests from around the country were arriving. The lobby buzzed with excitement, luggage carts rolled, reception phones rang, and laughter echoed from the bar. Every staff member was busy, making sure the hotel looked perfect. In the midst of this luxury, no one noticed the faint sound of footsteps outside. The glass doors slid open, and a man stepped in quietly. He looked completely out of place. His clothes were simple, slightly dusty, and his shoes had clearly walked many miles. He carried no expensive luggage, no shining watch, no fragrance of wealth. He walked slowly, his eyes wandering, as if taking in the beauty around him. Instantly, conversations halted. The receptionist froze mid-sentence, the bellboy stopped pushing the cart, and whispers began to rise. The man gave a small, polite nod toward the counter, unaware of the storm he had just walked into. Mr. Rajan noticed him from across the lobby. His eyebrows knit together, his lips curled slightly. In his mind, the man didn't belong there, not among the rich, not under the hotel's shining chandeliers. He straightened his tie and walked toward him, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. The poor man smiled gently and said in a soft voice, "Good evening, sir. May I ask how much a night's stay costs here?" His tone was humble, but his words were clear, calm, and confident. The staff exchanged glances, trying not to laugh. One of them whispered, "He can't afford even a glass of water here." Before the manager could respond, a wealthy guest interrupted, checking in with a platinum card. Mr. Rajan turned to him instantly, ignoring the poor man as if he had vanished. The staff followed his lead, serving the rich guest with smiles and offering him champagne, while the other man stood silently by the corner, waiting. Minutes passed. The man looked down, not in shame, but in quiet patience. He wasn't angry, just observant. He seemed to be studying how people behaved, how quickly kindness disappeared when faced with a ragged shirt. The atmosphere of the hotel had revealed more than any words could. It was a place polished with wealth, but hollowed by arrogance. The chandeliers still sparkled. The music still played, but somewhere deep inside that luxury, a test of humanity was about to begin. The lobby of the Grand Pearl shimmered beneath golden lights, but for one man, it felt colder than winter. The humble visitor stood silently near the reception, his fingers nervously brushing the hem of his worn-out coat. He waited patiently, hoping someone would acknowledge him. But minutes passed, and the staff continued moving around as if he were invisible. The sound of rolling suitcases and polite laughter filled the air, yet not a single smile was offered to him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stepped forward toward the counter. His voice was soft but steady. "Excuse me, may I have a glass of water, please?" The young receptionist looked up, startled, as if a ghost had spoken. Her eyes quickly scanned his clothes, no luxury watch, no shiny shoes, no expensive perfume. Her expression shifted from politeness to irritation. "Sir," she said curtly, "this area is for guests only. Please step aside." The man blinked in confusion. "I understand," he said gently, "but I'm thinking about booking a room. I'd just like some water before." Before he could finish, the receptionist laughed under her breath. "Booking a room? Here?" She glanced over at her colleague, who smirked and muttered, "Maybe he means the staff quarters." At that moment, Mr. Rajan, the manager, approached, his face carrying that familiar look of superiority. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Nothing, sir," replied the receptionist. "This man says he wants to book a room." The manager turned his gaze to the stranger. For a second, he examined him, the old shoes, the simple shirt, the dust on his sleeves. Then he gave a fake smile. "I'm sorry, sir," he said in a voice dripping with sarcasm, "but our rooms start at 50,000 a night. I'm sure you'll find something more suitable down the street." A few guests overheard and began to chuckle. The poor man smiled faintly, but his eyes, calm and deep, didn't show anger. Instead, they carried something else, disappointment. "I see," he said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He turned to leave, but just then one of the waiters, a young man with a kind face, hesitated. He whispered, "Sir, wait, I can get you some water." But before he could move, Mr. Rajan shot him a glare that froze him in place. "Focus on your work," the manager snapped. "We don't serve wanderers." The man stopped, guilt filling his eyes. The poor visitor gave him a reassuring smile, as if to say, "It's all right. You did your best." He turned back one last time, looked around the grand lobby, the gold, the lights, the proud faces, and then walked slowly toward the exit. As he pushed open the glass doors, a gust of cold evening air entered the lobby. For a brief moment, the music seemed to fade, the laughter softened, and an odd silence filled the room. The man stepped out, his reflection disappearing in the glass behind him. None of them knew that the person they had just humiliated was silently writing their fate, one that would change the Grand Pearl forever. Behind him, the staff began whispering again. "Did you see his shoes?" One laughed. "He probably couldn't even afford a cup of tea here." Another added mockingly, "I bet he's just trying to sneak around looking for free food." Mr. Rajan straightened his tie proudly. "That's why I'm here," he said, smirking, "to keep people like that out. They bring down the image of our hotel." Everyone nodded in agreement, except for the young waiter, who couldn't shake off the guilt building in his chest. Something about that man's eyes, that calm smile, had felt different. Not like a beggar's, more like someone who was testing something or someone. As the night settled, no one in the Grand Pearl knew that the test had already begun. And by sunrise, the same man they had thrown out would return not as a guest, but as their boss. The next morning, the Grand Pearl was alive with its usual rhythm, waiters rushing with silver trays, guests discussing business deals, and the manager, Mr. Rajan, strutting through the lobby like a king in his palace. The chandeliers glistened, the scent of luxury filled the air, and once again, everyone acted as if perfection was the hotel's natural state. Then just as the clock struck 11, the glass doors opened, and he walked in again, the same man they had dismissed the night before, the same humble clothes, the same calm eyes. This time he entered with quiet determination. His steps were slow but confident. He didn't look around nervously, he walked straight toward the reception counter. The staff froze for a moment, then the murmurs began. "He's back," someone whispered. "Didn't we tell him yesterday this place isn't for people like him?" Another laughed softly. "Maybe he's here to beg for leftovers." Mr. Rajan's face darkened with irritation. He walked toward the man, his shoes clicking against the marble floor. "You again?" he said in a sharp tone. "Did I make myself clear yesterday? You don't belong here. Leave before I have security escort you out." The man smiled faintly, his voice calm. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble. I just wanted to speak to someone about a business matter." The words made the manager laugh loudly. "A business matter?" he repeated mockingly, turning to his staff and gesturing toward the man. "Everyone, listen to this. He says he has business here." Laughter rippled through the lobby. Even a few guests turned to look, curious about the commotion. The poor man stood quietly amid the laughter, his posture dignified, his gaze steady. "Yes," he said softly, "a business matter." Mr. Rajan's voice grew louder, fueled by pride. "Sir, this is a five-star establishment. We deal with investors, CEOs, and international clients, not street wanderers pretending to be businessmen. Now, please leave." By now, the lobby was silent, except for the hum of whispered judgment. Some guests shook their heads, others smirked. The receptionist giggled behind her hand. The humiliation was complete, or so they thought. Still, the man didn't react. He didn't raise his voice, didn't fight back. He simply looked at the manager, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for your time," he said calmly. "You've shown me everything I needed to see." With that, he turned and walked away once more, his quiet footsteps echoing through the marble hall. The staff stared after him, confused. The manager chuckled, brushing off his sleeves proudly. "These kinds of people show up now and then," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They think looking humble makes them special, but in this world, appearance is everything." The guests nodded, some out of agreement, others just to stay polite. The young waiter from yesterday stood in the corner, his fists clenched. He wanted to speak up, to tell his boss to stop, but fear silenced him. Deep down, though, he felt something shift. That man wasn't ordinary. His eyes had carried power, even beneath his simple clothes. As the poor man stepped outside, a black luxury car waiting nearby honked once. The driver hurried to open the door for him, but the hotel staff, too busy laughing, didn't notice. The man got in quietly, the car pulled away, and the reflection of the Grand Pearl faded from the tinted window. Inside the car, he took a deep breath, looking back one last time. So this is what my employees have become, he murmured to himself. Arrogant, heartless, blind to respect. His voice was calm, but his eyes were heavy with disappointment. Tomorrow, he said softly, they'll learn what humility really means. And with that, the car disappeared down the road, leaving behind a hotel that had just insulted its own owner in front of everyone. That night, the Grand Pearl slept peacefully, unaware that its brightest day of shame was yet to come, because the man they had mocked as poor would return, not in torn clothes, but in a suit worth more than their yearly salaries. And when he did, the truth would break their pride like glass. The sun rose slowly over the city, casting golden light through the glass walls of the Grand Pearl. The hotel, as always, buzzed with routine, the clatter of breakfast trays, the echo of polished shoes, the sweet aroma of coffee floating through the air. But this morning was different. The atmosphere carried a pulse of nervous excitement. Rumors had spread through every corridor. The owner is coming today. He's never visited before. He's inspecting everything personally. The staff moved like bees in a hive, panicked yet determined. Every corner was being scrubbed, every flower rearranged. Even the chandeliers were polished until they gleamed like diamonds. The same receptionist who had laughed yesterday now triple-checked the front desk. The waiters ironed their uniforms twice. Mr. Rajan, the manager, barked orders louder than ever, his voice booming through the lobby. "Move faster, the owner could walk in any minute," he shouted. "I want perfection, not a speck of dust anywhere." The employees obeyed, but behind their hurried movements was fear. No one had ever seen the mysterious owner of the Grand Pearl. His name was whispered in admiration and awe, a man known for his success, generosity, and discipline. Some said he built the hotel from scratch, others claimed he inherited it from an empire, but no one really knew the truth. By noon, everything sparkled. The carpets were spotless, the gold trimmings polished, and every employee stood at their position, pretending to smile but trembling inside. The air smelled of tension and luxury, a mix that could only exist in a place where pride had replaced humanity. And then the moment came. A sleek black luxury car rolled up to the grand entrance. Its tinted windows reflected the curious faces of the staff lined up at the door. The doorman straightened his cap, the bellboys stood stiff, and Mr. Rajan smoothed his tie one last time. The car door opened. Out stepped a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, confident, calm, and commanding. His presence alone made the air shift. The staff couldn't see his face clearly at first, blinded by the morning sun. But as he walked forward, one step at a time, their smiles began to fade. Because standing before them was not a stranger, but the same man they had thrown out, humiliated, and mocked as a beggar. Gasps filled the air. The receptionist's hands trembled. One of the waiters dropped a tray, the sound echoing across the marble floor. Mr. Rajan's confident smile cracked instantly, his face draining of color. The man paused in front of them, his calm eyes scanning each face. He smiled faintly, the same gentle smile he had worn when asking for water. But now, behind that smile, there was something else, authority. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice was steady, powerful, yet without anger. "I believe we've met before." Silence fell like a curtain. No one dared speak. The receptionist's eyes welled with tears. Mr. Rajan opened his mouth to explain, but no words came out. The man continued, "Yesterday, I came here as an ordinary guest, and I was reminded of something important, that true luxury is not in gold, but in grace." He paused, his gaze firm. "And today, I return as the owner, not to punish, but to show you what this hotel should stand for." Every word hit like a thunderclap. The staff stood frozen, the weight of their own actions crashing down upon them. Mr. Rajan finally found his voice, stammering, "Yes, sir, we didn't recognize you." The man turned his calm eyes toward him. "Recognition isn't needed to show respect, Mr. Rajan," he said quietly. "You don't need to know someone's name to treat them with dignity." He turned away, signaling his personal assistant to hand him a folder. Inside were reports, staff records, and incident logs, including yesterday's entry, written by the receptionist herself. A poor man entered and was asked to leave. The irony cut deep. The man closed the folder and said softly, "Today, I didn't come to fire anyone. I came to open your eyes." Then he walked past them, heading toward the elevator. The sound of his footsteps echoed, steady, slow, and full of power. Behind him, the once proud staff now stood speechless, their arrogance replaced by guilt. The walls that had seen laughter and pride now absorbed silence and shame. And as the elevator doors closed, the engraved gold letters on the wall, the Grand Pearl, seemed to shimmer with a new meaning. The truth was out. The man they had insulted was not poor, not a wanderer, not a beggar. He was the one who had built everything they were standing on. And from that moment forward, nothing inside the Grand Pearl would ever be the same again. The elevator doors opened on the top floor of the Grand Pearl, the executive suite level, where only the highest-ranking guests or the owner himself ever set foot. The air was silent, heavy with anticipation. Down below, the staff whispered nervously. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak. Every tick of the lobby clock echoed like thunder. Within minutes, a message spread through the hotel. "The owner has called for a staff meeting immediately." Fear swept through the employees like a cold wind. The receptionist felt her hands trembling as she straightened her uniform. The waiters exchanged anxious glances. Even Mr. Rajan, the proud and unshakable manager, found himself sweating as he tried to fix his tie in the mirror. His reflection, once full of confidence, now looked pale and shaken. The conference hall was prepared hastily. Long tables were lined up, chairs arranged in rows. No music played this time, just silence. Slowly, the employees entered one by one, their footsteps cautious, their eyes lowered. Then the doors opened, and he walked in. The owner, the same man they had insulted, mocked. And thrown out, stepped forward with quiet authority. His suit was simple yet elegant, his posture strong but humble. There was no anger in his expression, only calmness, the kind that comes not from pride, but from wisdom. He looked around the room, his gaze meeting every eye. The silence was suffocating. Finally, he spoke. "Yesterday," he began softly, "I walked into this hotel, my hotel, dressed as an ordinary man. I wanted to see how my employees treat strangers, how they represent the values this place was built on." His words cut through the air like lightning. Heads bowed in shame. No one dared to look up. "What I saw," he continued, "wasn't service. It wasn't hospitality. It was arrogance, cruelty, judgment." He paused for a long moment. The weight of his voice filled every corner of the room. "You thought my clothes defined my worth. You decided I wasn't worthy of your respect. Tell me," he said, looking directly at Mr. Rajan, "if a poor man walks in, is he not human? Does he not deserve a glass of water?" Mr. Rajan swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Sir, I didn't know it was you." The owner raised his hand, silencing him. "That's exactly the problem. You should not need to know who someone is to treat them with kindness." The room fell silent again. The receptionist's eyes filled with tears. One of the waiters quietly wiped his face, ashamed. "Do you know what real success is?" the owner asked, his tone gentler now. "It's not the gold on your walls or the price of your suits. Real success is the ability to remain kind, even when you have power." He began to walk slowly across the room, each step deliberate. "When I started this hotel years ago, I built it with one principle: respect. Respect for guests, respect for workers, respect for every soul who walks through these doors. But yesterday, I saw that this building had lost its soul." He turned to face the manager directly. "Mr. Rajan, you've turned this hotel into a palace of pride. You humiliated me without a second thought. You've forgotten that the purpose of hospitality is to serve, not to show off." Tears began to roll down the receptionist's cheeks. "Sir, please forgive us. We didn't mean to." The owner's voice softened again. "I'm not here for revenge," he said. "I'm here for change, because if this place doesn't change, then all the money in the world means nothing." He looked around the room once more, his tone now firm but full of grace. "Every person you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. Never judge by appearance. Kindness costs nothing, but it can buy a lifetime of respect. The staff remained silent, some crying quietly, others staring at the floor, too ashamed to speak. Mr. Rajan finally broke down, his pride crumbling. "Sir, I have no excuse," he said weakly. "You're right, I've been blind. I forgot why I started working here in the first place. Please give me one chance to make it right." The owner looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You'll have that chance, all of you will." He placed a hand on the table and said calmly, "From tomorrow, this hotel will not just be known for its luxury, but for its heart. Every guest, rich or poor, will be treated with dignity. That is the new rule of the Grand Pearl." The staff clapped hesitantly at first, then more firmly, not out of formality, but out of genuine respect. For the first time, they weren't clapping for their boss, they were clapping for a lesson that had opened their eyes. The owner smiled faintly, his eyes softening. "Sometimes," he said, "you have to lose your pride to find your purpose." As he turned to leave, his footsteps echoed once again, but this time the sound carried something new: respect. And for the first time in a long while, the Grand Pearl felt alive, not with vanity, but with humility. The morning after the confrontation, the Grand Pearl Hotel didn't wake up to its usual rhythm of hurried footsteps and forced smiles. Instead, the air carried a quiet sense of reflection. Every employee, from the top manager to the housekeeping staff, arrived early that day, not out of duty, but out of guilt and the desire to make things right. For the first time in years, the staff didn't gossip at the counter or scroll through their phones before the shift began. They stood in a circle in the lobby, heads bowed, eyes filled with remorse. The receptionist, who once laughed at the poor man, was now holding a notebook, ready to start over. "We were wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We all were." The manager, Mr. Rajan, who had once strutted through the halls with arrogance, now stood silently at the back. His perfectly ironed suit couldn't hide the shame on his face. "We judged someone without knowing who he truly was," he said quietly. "But the truth is, it shouldn't have mattered who he was. We failed as human beings first, and as professionals second." The owner's words from the night before still echoed in everyone's mind. Kindness costs nothing, but it can buy a lifetime of respect. From that day onward, everything began to change. The transformation wasn't loud or forced. It started with small, genuine acts of kindness. A poor old man walked in one morning, asking for directions. Instead of ignoring him, the bellboy offered him water and walked him personally to the gate. A single mother came in, struggling to carry her luggage, and the receptionist, without hesitation, left her desk to help. For the first time, the hotel wasn't just serving guests, it was touching lives. One particular afternoon, a homeless boy wandered near the entrance, his clothes torn, his face dusty. The security guard, remembering the owner's story, didn't chase him away. Instead, he offered him food from the hotel kitchen. The boy's eyes sparkled as he said, "Thank you, sir." The guard smiled, realizing how good it felt to treat someone with compassion instead of suspicion. The change wasn't just emotional, it became visible. Guests noticed the difference. The reviews began to mention warmth, genuine hospitality, and a staff that truly cares. The hotel that once prided itself on luxury now became known for something far more valuable: humanity. Even Mr. Rajan changed. He started spending more time with his team, listening to their problems, mentoring the younger staff instead of intimidating them. He donated a part of his salary to help train underprivileged youth in hospitality, a gesture that surprised everyone. One evening, the owner quietly observed from a distance. He saw his staff smiling genuinely, guests laughing, and the hotel buzzing with life again, not the artificial luxury of marble floors, but the warmth of hearts that had learned humility. He turned to his assistant and said softly, "You see, success doesn't come from how tall your building is. It comes from how deep your values go." That night, a new signboard was placed at the entrance of the hotel, in bold letters. It read, "At the Grand Pearl, everyone deserves respect." The receptionist, now proud and humbled, smiled at the sight of it. She remembered how a simple moment of cruelty had turned into a life-changing lesson for them all. Guests often asked about the quote on the board. Each time, the staff shared the story of the poor man who walked in one day and changed everything. They didn't mention he was the owner. They simply said, "He was someone who reminded us what being human really means." And just like that, the lesson spread beyond the walls of the hotel, carried by every guest who heard the story, every worker who lived it, and every heart it touched. The Grand Pearl was no longer just a place to stay. It had become a story, one of redemption, compassion, and second chances. That night, when the lights of the Grand Pearl Hotel dimmed and silence returned to the hallways, the owner, Mr. Arian Mehra, sat alone in his office. The large glass windows overlooked the city's glittering skyline, but his eyes weren't focused on the lights outside. They were lost in memories, old, painful, and deeply personal. He took a slow breath and leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to the night years ago when he was just a poor young man with nothing but dreams in his pocket. He remembered walking past the same hotel when it wasn't his, when he couldn't even afford a cup of coffee inside. The guards had turned him away back then too, laughing at his shabby clothes. That humiliation had burned deep inside him, fueling his ambition to build something better, a place where no one would ever feel small. But somewhere along the way, as his wealth grew and success surrounded him, he had forgotten the pain that built him. His employees had reflected that same arrogance, the very thing he once hated. He whispered to himself, maybe this wasn't their fault, maybe it was mine. The truth hit him like a wave. He had built tall walls of luxury, but not enough bridges of compassion. He had focused on prestige,